Rangers fans, welcome to season 3 of Liberty Blue, the Essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney. That's Nick Zararis. And Nick, they beat the Bruins, and then they lost to a Penguins team, Sans Crosby and Sans Malkin. And then they needed Will Cooley's heroics to drag them over the line to a win against the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are, by the way, missing their entire team due to injury. Time is ticking, and they don't have a whole lot of time, and they're running out of everything.
I feel like anybody who's still seriously talking about the playoffs at this point is in either the over the age of 50, like just savor every season, be happy that your favorite hockey team exists, school of thought, which I find really interesting that it's the old heads who have that perspective on, hey, they're trying their best. Aren't you happy you have a favorite team and all these guys on the team you like? Where wouldn't you with less time left on the mortal plane, be a little more demanding and expect a little bit more as opposed to just existing? And then there are the people who don't understand the math. It's real straightforward. They have 29 games left. They probably need something in the ballpark of 34 or 35 standings points. And even that's probably not going to be enough. You probably need closer to 40. And they would need to go 20-9, 19-11 down the stretch here. And the math is just not there for a team that is this bad. I mean, and it's one thing to be bad. They got outworked by a Pittsburgh team that had nobody playing.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh
was embarrassing. That perform I get in the third period the Penguins didn't have a single shot on goal. But where was that the first two periods where the Penguins were skating circles around you? You are a desperate team. Everybody knows what the standings look like. The Penguins do as well, but the Penguins are missing their best two players on the team, and like the rest of the roster just doesn't have it comparatively to the Rangers on paper, right? Like if you compare the two on paper, you take a look at it and you go, oh, the Rangers will dominate the Penguins all day, every day. That's not what happened. The first two periods, the Penguins looked like they just had 9 Hall of Famers. They were skating circles around this Rangers team. Are you not embarrassed? Are you not ashamed? Like, what are we doing here?
And that's why at this point, anybody who's still talking about, well, they say the right things, give me a break, man. I don't care about Vincent Trocheck saying we need to be better. It is February. At this point, you saying you need to be better is nothing. It is lip service. It's the same thing we said after that Devils game in December where they got into like the 3 fights in the one game. It's performative. That's not winning you the game. It's great they recognize they need to be better. If you can't go and do it, you're wasting our time. That's all this is. It is a group that has underperformed pretty much unanimously across the board. Pretty much every single player on this team has taken varying degrees of a step back from what they were last year.
Besides Sam Carrick and Will Cooley. That's it.
Yeah. Woo! And Will Cooley got his season derailed by having to try and drag around Zibanejad for a month and a half because we have to do everything in our power to get our third most expensive forward to play anything resembling competitive hockey. And we can't talk about that. We can't talk about Trocheck playing no defense. No, we can't talk about Lindgren playing no defense. We can't talk about Will Borgen playing no defense. We can't talk about Matt Rempe passing the puck directly to the other team in transition and letting them come back to score a goal against. No, we can't do that.
But we got to talk about Lafrenière.
We got to talk about Lafrenière.
That's it. And here's and we talked about this before we started the show. But
everyone has been bad.
Yes,
everyone.
Here's the thing. And I tweeted this out, I think it was last night or 2 days ago, whatever it was. Lafrenière is also having a bad season. Yes, like you can talk about Lafrenière. His back check doesn't exist. He's having a mediocre season offensively. Like he's not having a good year either. But you cannot, in good faith, continue to highlight Lafreniere's bad play while ignoring everybody else. Like Zibanejad's been had a pulse for the first time this whole season this past week, sure. But for the rest of it, he's been a miserable pile of nothing that the writers haven't really mentioned. Kreider's been bad all season. Trocheck's been as bad defensively as Lafrenière, but he says the right things, I guess.
And he had a good playoffs last year. That's the biggest thing.
He's getting the captaincy because he says the right things. Okay, whatever. You're not talking about Lindgren. You're not talking about you're not talking about Borgen, who hasn't been that great the past week either. Vakanainen's been a guy. Yes, we can highlight Lafreniere's bad play. I'm not saying you can't do that.
They just don't like the
guy.
But
you have to be honest about it. If you're gonna highlight Lafreniere's bad play, you gotta highlight everybody else's bad play because if only Lafrenière was bad, they would have The team wouldn't be this bad. The standings would look way different if this was only a Lafreniere problem. I got news for you. It's not just a Lafreniere problem. There's multiple, like, most of the team stinks. Are you gonna talk about that? Or are you just gonna highlight one guy? Like, this is a team issue through and through.
And it's frustrating because look, I don't assume I'm not in on I'm not a conspiracy theory person at large, but it's crazy how they all come to the same talking point. It's crazy that we are in the midst of a season where they were 2 games away from going to the cup final. They won the President's Trophy. They had the best season in the history of the franchise last year. And we're sitting here talking about the team's 5th or 6th best forwards effort on back checking. Panarin's going to finish with like 38 less points than last year. Zibanejad's going to finish with like 47 points this year. Trocheck's going to finish with 50 something. Kreider's going to finish with 30 something. Yes, Lafreniere's effort has been bad. My point I want to spin back at those people is, who do you think gave Lafreniere the impression it was okay to be lazy? Who do you think he watched the last 3 years never be held accountable for any bad decisions? Don't lecture me about, well, they need to be accountable. They don't run this team like a meritocracy. If they ran this team like a meritocracy, Mika Zibanejad would be in the ECHL right now because of the season he's had so far. Chris Kreider would be in Hartford running the net front on their power play if we were running a legitimate meritocracy. But we don't. We have non-hockey factors that we have to consider in our evaluations and in the management of our hockey team. It's why we're playing Zibanejad on the wing as opposed to third line center. It's why we had to go out and trade for Vincent Trocheck's best friend, as opposed to worrying about how are we going to be competitive 2 and 3 years from now. It's maddening to watch these games and feel like I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I read what the takeaways are, where everybody who's watching the game professionally is, well, Lafreniere didn't backcheck. How come we don't talk about Borgen going to cover the guy Miller's already marking? Where Borgen, if he simply does his job, Lafreniere doesn't need to bust it back to come back. Yeah. Should he? Yes. But for the last 2.5 seasons, Lafreniere hasn't been held accountable for that. So I understand that he doesn't do it. Panarin doesn't get held accountable for it. Trocheck doesn't get held accountable for it. And you want to say, well, it's a different standard. They're a different type of player. They're more expensive. They're veterans. The expectations are different. Then don't go lecturing me about how Lafreniere needs to be better, because then we're not running a meritocracy if guys get to pick and choose when they give effort. That's my biggest issue. And we talked about this last year when they were a good team, that well, as long as they create more offense than they give back, it's okay that they're kind of crappy defensively. But now they're not creating nearly as much offense. The effort from across the board is not where it needs to be. And they're highlighting the 23-year-old who has only grown up in an environment where players aren't held accountable. I struggle to envision a world where these ideas are concurrent and congruent with each other, because they don't line up. They fundamentally do not make sense in relation to what we are seeing. Yes, Lafreniere has been bad. He is the team's 6th or 7th best player. That is not my most pressing issue when I watch the Rangers on a nightly basis. Is Lafreniere going to back check aggressively as he needs to? No, he doesn't. We know this.
Yeah. I think this goes back to a larger conversation I wanted to highlight for a little bit here, which is, I saw this the Talking Point or article earlier this week about, the NHL viewership being down. And I think one of the things that goes to that, stat is when you turn on NHL Network, the takes are all ridiculous.
Oh, they're horrendous.
Objectively, none of them have any substance to them. They're all just kind of yapping for the sake of yapping. And if you turn on a lot of the national broadcasts as well, you got like Mark Messier, PK Subban, and all these guys also yapping for the most part. They're also not really breaking down the game in a smart way. And I say that in this way. When you watch the NBA, you have guys like Tim Legler, who are one of the smartest basketball minds, to exist, really. And he's a gem of a person, sure, but also a gem of an analyst, where he will break down a situation, a defensive lapse, an offensive play, whatever, and he will break it down in one, a digestible way for the casual fan to enjoy, and two, in a way that intrigues the hardcore fan as well. It's like, oh, I didn't see, like, oh, this is cool, this is interesting, and okay, he's doing it in a way that isn't demeaning to anybody. In that he's talking to the casual fan that doesn't exactly know all the ins and outs, and he's also talking at the same time to the smart fan that understands what's going on. Who in the hockey world is Tim Legler?
So the reason this is a good question. Number one, hockey's too much of a niche sport for that level of expertise because we can't get on good time slots. We get Wednesdays at 8 and 10:30 because we have to go back to the panel after the first game ends to do 5 minutes of talking head stuff about how Connor Bedard doesn't back check
I
and
know.
the Blackhawks aren't going to ever win anything if Connor Bedard, who plays with Ryan Donato,
The
is
whole
31 years
Connor Bedard discourse is one of the most ridiculous things
Again,
I've
how
ever
is
seen in my
that
life.
your takeaway from
I
watching the
know.
Blackhawks? How is it the 19-year-old who weighs 175 pounds needs to be better back checking? Your takeaway from watching a team whose second best forward is 31-year-old Teuvo Teravainen. It feels like I am taking crazy pills. Look at that Blackhawks roster and tell me what you would like Connor Bedard to do. God himself is not getting that Blackhawks team in the playoffs. If you dropped 31-year-old prime Patrice Bergeron on that team, the best two-way center any of us have ever seen, they maybe win one or two more games. Hockey is a team sport. One guy, even a great guy, is not going to be able to do a whole hell of a lot. The Blackhawks last year, I wasn't hearing any concerns about Connor Bedard's defense last year when he was putting up a slightly better points per game rate. And again, this is an example of we can't talk about the issue here, which is Kyle Davidson has done a bad job of improving that roster year over year. No, we have to do the low-hanging fruit of first overall pick, easy conversation talking point. And look, he went off for a change 5 seconds early when the puck was in the offensive zone instead of staying on to maintain zone time. Again, he plays with Ryan Donato. He plays with Teuvo Teravainen. What would you like Connor Bedard to do about the fact he is
Yeah.
on the least talented roster in the entire NHL? They gave away Taylor Hall for what, a 4th-round pick to retain a little bit of salary? Somebody they went out of their way to acquire with the idea of he's going to play with Bedard. He's a first overall pick too. Somebody with a little bit left in their game. He can have a nice year here. We can ship him off at the deadline. And there's no plan there. There's no rhyme or reason to what the Blackhawks are doing. They're simply assembling a group of guys, and you look through that bottom 6 and the bottom half of their defensive group, that's a lot of misfit toys. You know, as much as we make fun of the Islanders for just getting any defenseman who goes on waivers, that Blackhawks roster is atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
How are you 3-4 years into a rebuild and that's what you have to show for it? You know, I think Frank Nazar is decent. I know the one defenseman they drafted a few years ago, they're relatively high on, but he hasn't come over from Europe yet. But like, you're 3 years into this and you have one singular thing to show for it. And instead of talking about, well, they probably need to improve the team more before we can have an honest conversation about this, we're nitpicking. We're nitpicking someone who everyone last year, they voted for him for the called over Brock Faber, who was better last year, and Luke Hughes, who arguably was better last year. I just don't get it sometimes. I just fundamentally don't.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, and we'll tie this back to Rangers as well. Like, it goes back to our earlier conversation where for some reason, it just feels like people are ignoring the larger stories here. Like, yes, Connor Bedard, could he back check a little better? Yeah. Could Lafrenière back check a little better? Yeah. No one's saying the answer to that is no. But like, like, we're looking at the list of problems right now, and like Lafrenière
It'd be like
Lafreniere's back checking issues is not number 1 on the list.
Yeah.
If you want to highlight problem number 7, okay, you should do that. Yeah, that's fair, but you can't ignore everything else. That's the whole point. Like, and that's why it's so frustrating to me. It sounds like it's also frustrating to you. It's like you can't just highlight one of them. You have to. There's a list, dog. You can't just ignore everything else and be like, oh well, Lafrenière. Oh, he's not back checking. Oh, he's another bust. He's another blah, 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 blah. Like you have to look at the whole picture. Can't just highlight one thing. That's why we've been talking every week on this show about Trocheck falling off a cliff, Zibanejad falling off a cliff, Kreider falling off a cliff, Lindgren falling off a cliff. Yes, Lafrenière also back checking offensively hasn't been all that great. Panarin is not going to have another career year. You know, like there's so many different problems with this team. Sticking to one and really doubling and tripling down on it is disingenuous at best, and it doesn't make any sense.
The example I would give you is if the check engine light in your car came on and you replaced the what's it called? You replace like the wind the why can't I wow, am I drawing a blank? This is embarrassing. Like you replace like the transmission fluid. Like yeah, you probably need to top off your transmission fluid, but like the check engine light came on. Maybe you want to go have a mechanic look at that and say, well, the entire thing that moves this car, that gives it its juice, that lets it run isn't working right. There's something that needs to be looked at here.
But there's a check engine light, and instead of actually going to the mechanic, you put in premium oil instead of like the regular. It's like
Yeah.
dog, like that's great, but there's a fire that you're not putting out. Like what are you
We
doing?
use that allegory. We use that metaphor too. The building's on fire and they're hanging around outside doing magic tricks in front of the building that's burning down. That's what trading for JT Miller is. Great. You got another fireman to help. The building is a pile of ash now, but great. You got another fireman from another fire department who's going to help at the next fire. That's great. It's great. Like JT Miller isn't the problem. That's my biggest gripe here. Like, they were 2 games away from the Stanley Cup final, and you have people genuinely with their whole chest saying, hey, you never know. All they got to do is get in. Do you watch this team play defense? Did you watch them play the Penguins, who have literally nothing to play for, who are every single player on that team other than Erik Karlsson, and I think Rickard Rakell got named as a replacement as well. Other than those 2 guys, everybody else on that team is thinking about spending the next 2 weeks somewhere very warm and very tropical. They went out there and busted the Rangers' ass. Look, you want to talk about funny shit. It's hilarious, objectively hilarious that Trocheck and Kreider got picked to represent Team USA over guys like Caulfield and Tage Thompson purely because Chris Drury was the assistant GM. Those guys on performance do not deserve to be going.
No.
But they paid their dues. They missed out on the last 3 Olympic cycles. They missed out on a World Cup of hockey. We owe it to those guys. And again, we are missing the point here. The Rangers on every measure have regressed. I have a ton of stuff to compare last year's team to this year's team. The defense is abominable. And this is a good example. At the end of last year's playoffs, you and I were talking about, is Erik Gustafsson great? No. Is he above average? Is he better what they've had at third pair lefty for the last 4 seasons? Yes. Unequivocally, yes. And you are seeing the difference from above average third pair left-handed defenseman to average or worse. Like, is Vakanainen offensively bad? No, he's not Ben Harper. He's not Rob O'Gara. He's not good. He's not an above average player. He doesn't make the team better. Hell, Zach Jones played 1 game after sitting for 2.5 months, and he was their second best defenseman in that game. He is somebody who
can't wait for Zach Jones to get traded for an Arby's coupon. I can't wait for that.
His archetype is hard to get
tweet to come down from Staple or Larry. Oh, sources are telling me the Rangers are going to sit out Zach Jones for the purpose of a trade. And then, he'll get shipped out to a smart team like Colorado or something for a 7th round pick. And then, he'll look really good, and the Rangers will look silly for the millionth time because they don't know how to evaluate good defensemen. We've seen this story before. We've read the book. We know how it ends.
And look, I'm not saying Zach Jones is fixing this team. He's just better than what they're playing. He's
not a Norris-winning defenseman. He's not going to be Bobby Orr. He's not going to be Erik Karlsson. He's not going to be Nicholas Lidstrom. However,
he's better than Ryan Lindgren.
He's better than some of the guys that the Rangers are currently playing and refusing to sit. That's all we're saying. So as soon as he gets out of here, which will be sooner rather than later, he will look good. He'll play better, and now all of a sudden the Rangers once again will look ridiculous.
Like, guys the Rangers trade away don't usually go on to be incredible players, but like Zach Jones is definitely a functional NHL caliber player who has some upside and some potential that the Rangers just refuse to give opportunity to, for whatever reason. Some guys go on and have nice second and third acts in other places, guys like JT Miller. And then you can look at guys who, more middle of the road paths like Carl Hagelin, who carved out nice second halves of their careers on other places where they were just given more opportunity or more specialized roles. But again, looking at this roster, the bottom 6 is when they don't play Zibanejad on the third line, that bottom six is pretty ugly. The third defensive pair, like I do want to say again, I think it's hilarious that when the day they extended Borgen, immediately the talking point went out. Well, they could play Braden Schneider on the left. Have we seen Braden Schneider on the left in the last 2.5 weeks? No, we haven't, because you got okey doked. You repeated what was said on the conference call or what was in the email with the press release.
Right.
Again, if we were being serious, if we were being literal, we know the playoffs are a long shot this year. The final 30 games would be the time you would see Braden Schneider learning how to play on the left to accommodate the roster changes they've
Of
made.
course.
But we still got to play Ryan Lindgren. So we can't do that. So we have to sit here and waste everyone else's time. And that's the thing here, man. We do this show out of a little bit of psychosis and because we love this team.
Yeah.
And we are sitting here wasting a season where they had cup aspirations.
Oh yeah, Jimmy Vesey, by the way, was on the first slide.
Yeah.
Against Columbus.
You
What
know
are we
what?
doing? What are we like? Genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, I asked this question, and I want like a meaningful answer. Obviously, you're gonna respond the best way you can, but like from people that cover the team on a daily basis, what are we doing here?
This is the same franchise that would move Brendan Smith from the press box to third line right wing. So this is a very weird. This team never fails to make stunning lineup decisions. Kaliev is like the only guy on the team who shoots the puck. Again, do I think Kaliev is incredible? No. Is he better than some of the wingers they've played this year? Yes, unequivocally. But because of non-tangible reasons, we can't play the guy who actually shoots the puck. That is a skill set the Rangers sorely need. They don't shoot the puck enough. That's pretty much all he does is shoot the puck. That seems like a logical fit. He's a very similar player in his size and stature to what Kakko is. And that Kakko Hedel Cooley line was the Rangers' best line when the team was actually playing semi-decent hockey at the start of the season. And we just went entirely away from that for no real reason at all. No real reason at all other than to try and accommodate to get Kreider and Zibanejad going.
The kid line was the best line for years, essentially. Like, I know there were lulls and and then their play and like all of that, but in the biggest moments in the playoffs earlier on when the Rangers were playing well, the kid line was there and they were playing well. And so Chris Story's solution to the Rangers falling off a cliff is to remove two of the three players on that kid line, ship him elsewhere for reasons, and keeping your most tenured and by all accounts worst performing players because you like them more. That's what happened. Like, we can be honest about it. Let's be as honest as we possibly can be. That is what happened. Like, I understand Zibanejad has on a move clause. Like, I get that. Kreider hasn't been good. Trocheck hasn't been good. And now the spin zone is that Trocheck is going to be the captain because he says nice things. Can we please be serious for 1 second here? Can he play better? And then we can maybe have that conversation. Like, if the Rangers go on a 7-game win streak because Trocheck scores 12 goals and he's leading the team and everything and he's back checking and doing all these things, maybe we can have that conversation. I don't care about what he says in the locker room after a loss to the Penguins who are missing Crosby and Malkin. I don't care.
It is just, I use the word object permanence, missing the forest for the trees. The team fundamentally, and I have said this for years, I said this before they named Trouba the captain. There is not a guy on this team who screams captain. There is nobody on this team that when the chips are down, you feel confident in their ability to coax better performance out of their teammates. I said, based on how 2021 went, I don't think Trouba fit the bill. That ultimately bore out. I don't think, based on the fact that Trocheck can't go coax better performances out of his teammates against a Penguins team with no Crosby, no Malkin, with 16 of the 18 guys on the ice thinking about their vacation in Cancun, that tells me Vincent Trocheck probably not going to be the guy I want leading this team into the foxhole. This is only going to get harder from here and in terms of this season and the bigger picture the rest of the way, the next season, the year after that, the year after that. It's great. Everyone likes these guys, but I thought we were past that. I thought I thought we weren't running the country club here anymore. I thought we were making hard decisions to make the team better. And that's why we had to bring Trouba back, even though we knew that was going to be a bad decision. It's why we had to keep Barclay Goodrow an extra season longer than we wanted to. But again, there's no object permanence. No one has the attention span to maintain one coherent thought for more than a minute at a time. This team is terrible. And people will say, well, they're not terrible. They're just okay, fine. They're mediocre. Watching them on a nightly basis feels like a chore. It is not an enjoyable experience. It is not particularly fun. There are moments that are nice. The comeback win against the Bruins was a good feeling. The comeback win against
Sure.
Vegas, that was nice. But this team came into the year as like the fifth or sixth biggest favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And they're not even going to make the playoffs unless they go on a crazy second half heater and beat up on a lot of teams that are ahead of them. It feels like nobody realizes, and we talk about this a lot. You as a basketball person in particular the idea that you'll be back or will be back it's just not the way sports work.
No.
The idea of, hey, will be back. That KD, James Harden team, that Thunder team with Westbrook, when they lost to the Heat, everybody thought they'd be back. And then they traded James Harden a year later. And you can point to the Suns team that went to the final a couple years ago. Are the Bucks ever going to be back? Are the Sixers ever going to get there to begin with?
Yeah.
You
Well, the
know,
Sixers got to get out of the second round first. But
these teams, everybody, the Rangers will be back. Are you sure
are
about
you
that?
sure?
Look around the NHL. Look at all of the teams that have had chances. The Sharks always thought they'd be back. The Predators thought they'd be back. The Stars thought they'd be back. And we're going on 4 years for the Stars. The Sharks have blown up their core since. Nashville very much has blown up their core since. And this Rangers team, the expensive guys are older. Other than Fox and Shesterkin, those guys are older. And Fox and Shesterkin, they're not exactly young anymore. I'm not going to say they're old, but they're reaching, the zenith of their NHL powers in their mid to late 20s. You are wasting a prime Adam Fox year.
Yep.
You are wasting a Shesterkin prime year. And look, has Shesterkin been incredible? No. He's been an above average, teetering on good goalie this year. He is not the issue with this team. Anybody who is doing can the goalie make a big save in a game? They're scoring 2 goals a game against a Penguins team who is objectively bad at defense.
Penguins had 0 shots on goal in the third period and they still won the game.
I do not understand how you watch these games and and look, that's part of the beauty of hockey is that everybody watches and there are slightly different takeaways. But this team is so massively underperformed this year and across the board. The only thing that's relatively consistent year over year from last year is the penalty kill. Shows how valuable a good penalty kill is in relation to everything else. It's not winning you games. Sure. Does it help? Is it a nice supplemental factor? Sure. But year over year, they're on pace to score like 30 fewer goals than last year overall. They're going to concede 25 more than they did last year. They're scoring about half a
It's
goal
a
less.
55 goal swing, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is not, I know it's quick maths for you, but also like that just highlights how much of a pendulum swing last year's team was to this year's team. If this is the same team, okay, 55 goal swing that's horrible. I mean, that's got to be one of the biggest swings year in to year out from a team that won a million games last season to a team that isn't even in the playoff spot in February. Like, that's insane.
It 278 goals for last year, 226 goals against. They're on pace to have a negative goal differential this year. They're on pace to go 244, 250 this year. They are so much worse defensively. Because they are so much worse defensively, they're giving up, about one full more high danger chance per game. Their shooting percentage and save percentage are both relatively year over year similar. It's really just the volume of quality chances against. They're about 3% worse on high danger chances overall, about 1.5 more against per game. The expected goals and the scoring chances are relatively close to what they were last year, but those marginal decreases and the guys who had career years last year, that's enough to derail you, man. The Rangers always were, and this has been, one of the driving talking points of the show in its entire existence. It's all very fragile when you're banking on your special teams and your elite players' finishing talent. You know, when your best players aren't playing amazing and they fundamentally need difficult environmental factors to sustain to be effective. You know, the way we talked about Zibanejad and Kreider off the rush, that the reason they kept coming up short in the playoffs was, well, those guys thrive off of the rush and it's a lot harder to create off of the rush in the playoffs. And now they don't create off of the rush like at all, even in the regular season. And you are seeing just how tenuous this entire project and operation is. It's really frustrating that year over year, the talking points have been, well, they just got to get lucky. They just got to get the supporting cast right. When fundamentally, the core cast itself wasn't good enough. And
Yep.
that's, I think, what my biggest frustration is as we sit here right now, that people are going to talk themselves into, well, they'll come back next year. They'll go Miller Trocheck down the middle. They're going to get rid of one of Kreider, Zibanejad, or both. And they're just going to replace, you know, a third of the top six. And they're going to get another top four defenseman to replace Lindgren. And that's going to fix everything. You know how hard it is to get two top six wings? They haven't been able to get one top six wing to supplement Kreider and Zibanejad in the 4 years since they traded Buchnevich, man. And ultimately, we'll see. I think based on the last week, I think we've quelled the silly Ryan O'Reilly discourse that was starting to bubble on the surface.
There was Ryan O'Reilly discourse?
There was
there
was third line center discourse of, well, all they got to do is go out and trade for a third line center.
Oh my God.
Yeah, man.
I'm really glad I wasn't online for that.
It was
whatever brain cells I have left were saved because I was not around for that conversation.
The last bellwether point indicator I want to talk about is Sam and Joe have never been this miserable on the air in my entire life.
Oh, yeah.
They are actively fed up at this point. Like, if you let Joe Micheletti swing on someone, I think he would take you up on it because he's just so fed up with the lack of effort. It's genuinely disheartening because we've been at points been like, can Sam and Joe just say Lindgren had a bad game, please? They're at least letting the clip. They're emptying the clip. Whether or not Joe goes with Sam, we don't know yet. That hasn't been announced. But based on the general tenor of the broadcast this year, and like more than one time, Sam's been like, "So what are the keys to the the second or third period?" And Joe's like, "Trying harder." Making a better effort, and it's as many possible euphemisms for saying they're bad without saying they're bad. What are the keys to the third period, Joe? Well, they just got to try harder. They got to put in more effort. It's not great when your hometown guys are saying you look lazy. It's not saying when your guys who stamp you every single time are like, these guys stink. They are just not putting
pretty
in
much.
efforts.
You know how bad it's got to be, because every hometown broadcast team is a homer to a certain point.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of the
sliding scale.
That's part of the appeal of listening to your hometown broadcast. It's like you can be as homery as like the Avalanche cast is. Like, the Avalanche cast is so homery that it's like it's almost funny in a way. And they're really like Mark Moser is this like really like such a larger than life guy. Like his energy is impossible to match. But he's also a big homer. So if you're into that kind of thing, it's a blast to watch. Watching the Avs cast is great. There's this, like you said, there's a sliding, there's a scale of how much of a homer you're going to be when you're broadcasting the team that you're paid to broadcast. But it's never zero. No hometown broadcast is ever 100% neutral. That's the whole point of a hometown broadcast. So the fact that Joe and Sam, they talk to the Rangers every single day. They talk to the players every day, the coaching staff every day, the other team's players whenever they play, whenever it's a game day, every single time. Like, these guys are communicating constantly, and for them to continuously go on the air and be like, these guys are trying, like, for lack of a better way to say this, like, these guys stink. Like, they're not trying hard. They're not skating. What the hell's going on? Like, obviously, Sam and Joe aren't saying that, but they're essentially saying that. For them to go on the broadcast and say these things is such a, like, it really is the biggest red flag you give an organization, because these guys, by all accounts, should be the nicest to you. And yet they watch you play on a night-to-night basis and see how you just don't care to win. And they've had it. And now they like the hometown broadcast is calling you out. We're losing recipes here. Like, what are we doing? Like, how does this happen?
The attention to detail was never really there in the first place. You know, even last year, when you would watch Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere when they were one of the best lines in hockey, nobody was confusing that for a shutdown defensive line. You know, they won their minutes convincingly because they just played more offense. They still gave up tons of rushes going back the other way. It just wasn't as glaring because they were on offense so much. They were putting the puck in the net. They had Panarin playing like a top 5 player in the world. He finished, I think, third in Hart Trophy voting last year, second time he's been top 5 as a Ranger. And he's gone from Hart Trophy good to, you know, very good. And that trickle down has made Trocheck and Lafreniere significantly less effective this year. And that has permeated throughout the entire team. But that lack of attention to detail, that's always been here. You know, go back and watch any random episode from any of the last 2.5 seasons and listen to Andrew and I talk about how Miller and Trouba just never talked to each other. They would just cover the same guy, or nobody would go to the net front. And then they would, after the puck would go in the net, they would both sulk their shoulders and look at each other like, I thought that was your guy, as if they hadn't played 4,000 minutes with each other over the last 3 years. It's the same thing in terms of the back checking and the effort defensively. Trocheck and Lafreniere were doing the same thing last year. It just didn't matter as much because they were scoring more. When you allow things like that to slide because you're okay with the trade-off, you are implicitly telling these guys it's okay. You know, it's like getting away with doing subpar work in college or just at work, and because no one's calling you on it, you just keep doing it. And then eventually you get called on it because you do a shitty job on something that's a little more important. That's what the Rangers have done for the better part of this year of, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. It's February, man. You don't have the time to figure it out now. It is either you win 20 of the next 29 games, or the GM in an attempt to save his job, or if they miss the playoffs and he gets fired for missing the playoffs, the next guy's got to figure out how the hell to clean this up.
This is the Rangers have had a coach that doesn't apply any kind of, hey, you did this wrong thing. Hey, maybe like we should either talk about this, or if you don't fix it, like you're gonna sit out a game kind of mentality since Tortorella, maybe. Like Vino didn't do it, Quinn didn't do it, Gallant didn't do it, Laviolette's not doing it. At a certain point, you need a head coach in there that'll be like, hey, brother, you're back checking like you're out on a stroll with your partner at Rockefeller Center. Like, dog, either you back check or you will sit out. Actually go there and try to defend the play. Like, whether it doesn't matter, you know, who this player is, like, just there's just no accountability. There's zero. And the one of the things that I mentioned last week, I'll hammer this again. The question was posed to Laviolette, why Lindgren continued to play with Adam Fox, and his answer was that the pairings were set. Oh my God. What are we doing? What are we doing here? Like, that doesn't make any, like, you've been a head coach in the NHL for 1,000,000 years. What kind of answer is that? Are you telling me that if things don't work, you're just gonna keep doing it because there's set pairings? Brother, you know better than that. You're smarter than that. You've been a head coach for a long time. Surely, if I can see what's wrong with that logic, you can too. Right? Right? Please. Like, we're both taking crazy pills, Nick. It's like this is just a lot of these answers feel so in your face. They feel so blatant. They're like, oh my God, like, yeah, this is how you start fixing this team. And yet for some reason, like, everyone wants to avoid them. I just continue to be mesmerized by the team, by the media that covers them. We're all kind of staring the answers in the face, and we're going, oh, but that shiny thing over there. Why?
There's a metaphor for this. Something like if there was a ship sinking and people wanted to rearrange the deck chairs. It's a shame there's not a euphemism for
Mm.
what the Rangers are doing right now, but it kind of feels like they're on a sinking ship, and instead of trying to plug the hole, they're rearranging the chairs people are sitting on the deck. I couldn't think of what the metaphor is, but there's something. There is an example of something like that
I
that's
wonder
out
what that
there in
could
the
be.
ether. I, it's going to be fun to watch Adam Fox play with a real defensive partner for 2 weeks and
Mhm.
then come back, and everyone's going to be shocked that he doesn't look as good playing with Ryan Lindgren as he did playing with Jacob Slavin for 2 weeks. Could you imagine how much Adam Fox's life would be easier if he played with somebody who was actually good at playing defense?
His stats are really good, and that's with Ryan Lindgren anchoring the hell
Yeah.
out of that pair. Could you imagine if he played with not an AHL defenseman? Could you imagine if they gave him a defenseman that actually knew how to play defense or that wasn't terrified of handling the puck at all? Oh my god, like Adam Fox would win 7 Norris trophies, but no, he's got to play, he's got to cover for his man every goddamn time.
And it only exacerbates Fox's weaknesses because we know Adam Fox is not a physical, net clearing, puck winning defenseman. But because he is out there with somebody who is totally inept at handling the puck, Fox has to do a lot more than he probably needs to. And it puts him in those positions. Like, I know there were a lot of people who were on his ass about the first Bruins goal, the Saturday game, the first game Miller played, where he just lost a puck battle in the corner and Lindgren was standing in front of nobody at the net front, and the puck came in, and the Bruins scored there. But when you are asking guys to do stuff they're not good at, on top of the stuff they are good at, you are only going to notice the stuff they are bad at because you expect them to do the other thing. And Fox is not, he's not cut from that Slavin mold. He's not like, and McAvoy is more physically imposing, and he's better at the physical components of playing defense. And what Fox is great at is the positioning stuff and the outsmarting guys. And that's sticky. That's something that, even though he's not the fastest guy in the world, translates well year over year. If you can give him someone who can take some of that punishment off his plate and just not be a total liability, you are going to be thoroughly impressed by what you see from Adam Fox over the next 2 weeks playing with Slavin. It's a shame Quinn Hughes isn't hurt. I would have really been curious to see how they would have allocated the 6 defensemen they do have over that, where you could have had the option of playing Fox with Quinn or with Werenski or with
Quinn
Jacob
Hughes and
Slavin.
Adam Fox on a pair is just, yeah,
It's a great,
that is just a cheat code, man.
it's something really, that's where hockey is going. It's just a matter of how long it takes to get there. We have seen the reticence to the Zach Jones type over the years, whether it's Clendenning or whether it's Rafi Diaz, of guys who are very clearly NHL caliber defensemen, but teams just don't want that volatility associated with the offense, because if they're not going to run the first power play, the opportunities for them to be materially impactful. I mean, you're watching the same thing happen with Nils Lundqvist in Dallas, who has good underlying numbers, but they just do not trust him because he's not big, because he can't clear the net front. And you're watching people leave games on the table. And that's really one of the differentiation points between teams, is how willing are they to push the envelope to try and get better. And the Rangers' unwillingness to push the envelope is why they're probably stuck at where they're at. Like, they'll probably be better next year. They'll probably be a playoff team next year. But, like, for all intents and purposes, this team's window as a Stanley Cup contender is closed.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
year or two from now, and Panarin's off the books, and Kreider's off the books, and Zibanejad, at least one of
Has
Zibanejad.
3 more years left on his
Yeah,
contract in 2
2
years.
years from now, he still has 3 years left. Yes. You assume that by
Nice
the
contract, baby. Woo!
hey man, go read the clips. I hate to be the journalism guy and say read the clips, but go read the clips I wrote in 2021 about, hey, he's only 26 and his defensive impacts are already declining. Maybe don't make him your franchise center, because of that, they went out and got Trocheck, and they had to go out and get
I
JT
hate this
Miller.
comment. I really hate this comment.
Okay, so number one, we could talk about this.
Frank,
Frank,
and for those that are listening, by the way, Frank Herndon says, has Igor been worth
he
the
hasn't. He's not
11.7
being paid
million dollars?
11.7 million yet. So, like, that's not a
Yeah.
totally that's not a totally straightforward
So
question.
is
No, he
Shesterkin
hasn't.
also supposed to score the goals and play the defense? Because That's
So
been
I don't want to just dismiss Frank's question because I think it's a reasonable question
sure.
in the sense that he has not been his usual sublime self. Shesterkin has not been a top 5 goalie in the NHL this year. That is entirely fair. I think most people would agree with you in that respect. The one counterpoint, aside from the fact he's not being paid 11-7 yet, is he, goaltending is an environmental factor, and for the first month and a half, 2 months, him and Quick were both playing pretty well, and the defense entirely fell off a cliff. And there were more than one opportunities in there for this team to turn things around and couldn't pick them up. And right now, with the results slightly a little bit better, and we'll see how he is coming off of the 2-week layoff. We'll see if he's good to go that first game or if they want to give him an extra day or two, give Quick one more start. They laid their bed with Shesterkin, and we talked about this on the episode right after they paid him. If you wanted to say they needed to move on from Shesterkin, you could talk me into that, but you needed to restart the entire team. That's the thing. And Andrew, I forget what episode it was back in, I think it was December when they gave him the extension. I could understand the reticence to paying a goalie that much money. I do. The problem is that would require Chris Drury acknowledging, hey, I built a bad team and we need to start over. And if he's going to say that to James Dolan, James Dolan's going to say, why would I let you do that if you messed it up the first time? I will go get someone else to do this. So because Chris Drury boxed himself in with Zibanejad, Trocheck, he said, well, I got to get this team better right now. So we got to keep Shesterkin. We got to go get JT Miller. We got to try and improve. And I get to prove to my boss I get to keep my job. So I can understand being frustrated with Shesterkin. I think that's valid. I also think, again, that's not the most pressing issue. It's an issue.
and again, he doubled down and said, oh, he always sits in a soft goal. I just I hate this argument. I really do, because every time he saves a surefire goal because the defense in front of him broke down, I don't hear the same people going, oh yeah, he definitely deserves it. But every time he lets up. Also, always lets in a soft goal is a crazy thing to say, which is just not true. But like,
it's frustrating.
It's frustrating, and I'm not here to say that Shesterkin is infallible. He has bad play. He does let in bad goals occasionally, but find me a goalie that doesn't. Like Vasilevsky does it. Brodeur did it. Hasek even did it. Waugh did
Shesterkin's
it.
still top 10 in goals saved above expected. He faces such a high rate of shots against. I want to say he's third in shots faced this year. Like, he faces a high volume of offense, a high volume of quality offense. Like we talked about, the high danger chances against are significantly higher than they were last year. Has he been Vezina good? No. I think people expect Vezina caliber goaltending for the resetting the market contract, and I get that. But again, I have more pressing issues than Shesterkin for me. Like,
if Grubauer, like if he played like Grubauer, where
yes.
Grubauer got that contract and now he's in the AHL because he's been that miserably bad, then yeah, like this argument would hold a lot more water, at least to me. But right now, again, we're doing the same thing that we did with Lafrenière. We have this massive list, and you're going down to like problem number 26 of.
I wouldn't say 26. I would say that's middle of the table. I would say that's ahead of Lafreniere's back checking for sure. But
it's not in the top 5.
Yes.
The top 5 problems right now need addressing quicker and it with significantly more of of
correction.
Correction. Yeah. You're right. Shesterkin's occasional bad goal is an issue. I'm not here to say that it's not. And so, especially there are times throughout the game where you need your goalie to make a big save
for momentum reasons too. He picked us up. Let's stay in this.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes that doesn't happen, which I understand the frustration that comes from the fans as a result. The problem is that that's not like there's so many bigger issues right now with this team that the Shesterkin conversation just doesn't pale in scale comparatively to the other massive issues with this team right now, right? Like you're trying to fix a little hole in your ship when, by the way, like I don't know if you saw, but there's an iceberg that just hit, brother. Like you got You got like you're sinking. Fixing
And
this one hole
they're
is
complaining about the song
you're
the
right.
orchestra's playing.
Yeah, like
You think the orchestra knows Not Like Us?
I think they're still playing Yeah by Usher.
Oh god, man. It sucks. This sucks, man. It'll be nice to watch hockey with less emotional stakes over the next week and a half. I am excited. We can wrap talking about Four Nations for a minute. We said this a few weeks ago, but like, is this ideal? No. It's better than an all-star game no one cares about, even the
Sure.
players. The players are getting something resembling an audition for the Olympics, which they care about. So you would assume the effort's going to be there. You know, the fact that Sid sat out the game on Friday and was immediately the first question today. Yeah, I'm good to go. I want to play. That tells me these guys are going to take this seriously. If Sid is sitting out a regular season game because he's a little iffy on an injury because he wants to represent Canada that badly, I think we'll see guys try. I think we will see pretty good hockey over the next week and a half. I wish there was a way we could have had more federations, but I understand the logistics make that a little more challenging. I understand the NHL didn't really want to do a Team Europe or a Team North America concept again, even though those would have been nice to see. I am tentatively excited. I'll be holding my breath. I don't want to see
Four
anyone.
Nations facing off, Nick. I don't know if you know that.
Hey, man, they will indeed be facing off. I am excited. I am looking forward to it. It'll be very interesting on Saturday night to watch all of the American hockey media like throw up their shoulders in disgust at the American national anthem getting booed in a sporting venue before Team USA plays Team Canada in the midst of very polarizing.
And then we're gonna hear Mark Messier and PK Subban argue about whether that's the right thing to do.
Oh yeah, if I don't need to do any Googling. I know how those guys feel about national anthems and other issues of a similar conversation, but I am excited for the hockey. I'm disappointed Quinn Hughes got hurt. He's having a tremendous season in spite of the fact he's hurt. It would have been really cool to see him play with whether it was with McAvoy or with Adam Fox. I think going into this, and this is like the Met fan in me, I expect Canada to win this because Team USA that's just Team USA's MO in these environments of we play Canada and we forget how to play hockey, where like you go back and look at the box scores from the World Cup of Hockey in 2016 and you remember, oh yeah, that's right. Team USA lost all 3 games and they had like a -8 goal differential. They scored
Justin
3 goals.
was on that
and
team,
Brandon Dubinsky and just good Lord, man.
Right.
I'm excited. I'll be tapped in on this a lot more than I would be for an all-star game, you know, especially because it's the same weekend as the NBA stuff, and the NBA stuff has its own issues, but like at least the Saturday night in that is always entertaining. The 3-point shootout, the dunk contest, the thing they did with Steph and Sabrina last year was cool too. So like I am more invested in this than I would be in an NHL All-Star weekend.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair thing to say. I kind of want to see how it starts, and then I'll kind of gauge where my head's at with these things. Like, yeah, I mean, am I gonna watch it? Yeah, I'm interested to see how the players play. I would have to imagine they're gonna play like as if they're at the Olympics because this is the closest they've been to that in a decade.
Yeah.
So like I would have to think that the play and aggression levels are going to be high, so the games are going to be fun. It's just a matter of will that continue throughout the tournament, and it's 2 weeks of no NHL hockey. So, well, if you're not watching the Four Nations facing off, or whatever Crosby said 97 times in that commercial, then what are you going to do for 2 weeks? You got to watch something.
Yeah, pretty much. It's something. It's better than nothing. And the players wanted this, which is why I'm more willing to be like, yeah, sure, whatever. This is one of the things the players are actually passionate about, is getting to represent their countries in international play. I do think that was funny. If you read the Athletics, they were anonymous survey of players across the league, and there were guys who were like, if it was on TV, I wouldn't change the channel, but I'm not going out of my way to watch it. I do find that funny as an analysis. It's not quite Mike Francesa saying if Metallica was playing in his backyard, he would close the blinds, but pretty close as far as my engagement level with what that person said. All right, that'll do it for this week's edition of Liberty Blue. We will talk to you guys at some point next week. I'll be traveling on Monday. Andrew and I got to work out the logistics to do our show next week, but we will talk to you guys some point early next week in the midst of Four Nations facing off. If you guys could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, throw the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. We'll see you guys soon.